My name is Emma. I was 26 years old, and my car was the one thing keeping my life from falling apart. It wasn't new. It wasn't pretty. The paint was faded, one window stuck halfway down, and the radio only worked if you pressed the knob just right. But it started every morning, and it got me to work on time. That was all I needed. I worked early shifts, sometimes late ones. Public transportation didn't line up with my schedule, and ride shares cost more than I could afford. Without my car, I didn't just lose convenience, I lost access to my job. That's why I was careful with it. The car was in my name. I paid for it myself. Insurance, maintenance, everything. But I parked it at my mom's house because my apartment complex didn't have reliable parking, and she had a driveway. I trusted her. It never crossed my mind that I shouldn't. That morning felt normal. I grabbed my bag, rushed through breakfast, and headed to work like I always did. I even remember glancing at the car before leaving, parked right where I'd left it, thinking absently that I needed to change the oil soon. I didn't know that would be the last time I saw it. Work was busy, stressful in the usual way. I stayed late, trying to make a good impression because layoffs had been whispered about for weeks. When my shift finally ended, I walked out exhausted, already planning the drive home in my head. I didn't realize I was about to discover that my car and my sense of security were already gone. I didn't notice right away. That was the strange part. I walked out of work tired, my feet aching, my mind already halfway home. I reached into my bag for my keys out of pure habit, fingers closing around the familiar weight, and started toward the parking lot before my brain caught up. Then I stopped. The space where my car should have been was empty. At first, I honestly thought I was just looking in the wrong place. I scanned the lot once, then again, walking a few rows over, even though I knew exactly where I'd parked that morning. The realization crept in slowly, like my mind was trying to protect me from jumping to conclusions. Maybe it had been towed. Maybe I'd forgotten something obvious. Maybe I was just exhausted. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. No missed calls, no messages, nothing to explain why my car wasn't where it belonged. That's when the panic hit. I called my mom immediately. It rang twice before she picked up. "Oh, you're off already?" she said, casual, almost cheerful. "Where's my car?" I asked. There was a pause. Not a confused one, a measured one. "I sold it," she said. The words didn't register at first. They sounded unreal, like she'd said them in the wrong order. "You... what?" I asked. "I sold the car," she repeated. "I meant to tell you." I laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound that made a couple of people in the parking lot glance over. "That's not funny. I'm serious," she said. "A man came by this afternoon. Cash deal. It worked out." My chest tightened. "You sold my car while I was at work?" "Yes," she said, still calm. "I needed the money right away." I gripped my phone harder. "That wasn't yours to sell." "Well, it was sitting in my driveway," she replied. "And you weren't using it at the moment." I stared at the empty space in front of me, the concrete suddenly looking foreign, hostile. "I use it every day," I said. "You know that." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "You'll figure something out. Buses exist." That sentence landed harder than I expected. "Buses don't get me to work at 5 in the morning," I said. "You know that too." There was movement on her end of the line, the sound of her doing something else while we talked. "Your brother needed help," she said finally. "He's in a tough spot." My stomach dropped. "You gave him the money. He needed it more than you needed a car," she said. "He has bills. He has pressure. And I have a job," I said. "Or at least I did this morning." She didn't respond right away. "You're young," she said after a moment. "You're adaptable. You can take the bus, borrow rides, figure it out." I felt something inside me go cold. "You didn't even ask me," I said. "I knew you'd say no," she replied. Like that explained everything. I stood there for a long time after the call ended. My phone still pressed to my ear even though the line was dead. People walked past me, heading to their cars, engines starting, doors closing. The normal sounds of people going home felt unbearably loud. I had no ride, no warning, no idea how I was going to get to work the next day. I ended up taking a rideshare home, watching the cost climb higher than I wanted to look at. Every mile felt like another small punishment for trusting the wrong person. When I got to my mom's house later that night, the driveway was still empty. My brother's car was there instead. He was inside, relaxed, eating dinner like nothing had happened. He barely looked up when I walked in. "Hey," he said. "Mom told you?" I didn't answer. I went to my room, sat on the bed, and stared at the wall. My car was gone. My routine was shattered. And the people who were supposed to care had already decided I'd adjust. Because I always did. What I didn't know yet was how quickly everything else was about to unravel. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty driveway. The space where my car had been wasn't just missing metal and rubber, it was missing time. Options, control. By morning, the shock had faded, replaced by a tight, focused anxiety that sat heavy in my chest. I needed that job. I checked the bus routes before the sun came up, hoping, stupidly, that maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe there was a way. There wasn't. The earliest bus didn't even come close to my shift start. Even if I took 2 transfers and walked the rest, I'd still be late. I knocked on my mom's bedroom door just after 6. She answered in a robe, already irritated. "What now?" "I can't get to work," I said. "There's no bus that gets me there on time." She sighed dramatically. "Then call in." "I can't just call in," I replied. "I already used my warnings. They told me that." She shrugged. Then maybe this job wasn't meant to last. That was when it hit me. Not the loss of the car, not even the money. The indifference. "You sold my car," I said slowly, "and you're acting like this is an inconvenience, not a disaster." She crossed her arms. "I told you, buses exist. People manage without cars all the time." "Not with my hours," I said. "You know that." She shook her head, like I was refusing to see reason. "You're always so dramatic. Your brother didn't have options." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He had options. You just didn't like them." Her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "My tone?" I repeated. "You made a decision that affects my ability to work, and you didn't even warn me." "I'm your mother," she snapped. "I don't need permission to do what's best for this family." "For the family," I said. "Or for him?" She didn't answer right away. "He needed cash," she said finally. "Not lectures. He's under pressure." "So am I said. "I just don't get bailed out." She waved that off. "You're resilient. You always land on your feet." There it was again. Resilient, adaptable, flexible. Words that sounded like compliments until you realized they were excuses. "You didn't think about me at all," I said quietly. She softened her voice then, the way she did when she wanted to sound reasonable without actually backing down. "Of course I did. I knew you'd be upset. But I also knew you'd figure it out. You always do." I stared at her, finally understanding something I'd been circling for years. She didn't see my ability to survive as something to protect. She saw it as something to use. "You chose him," I said. She bristled. "This isn't about choosing sides." "It is," I replied. "You chose whose life could be disrupted." Her jaw tightened. "You're not being fair." I stepped back, feeling oddly calm now. "Fair left when you sold my car." She turned away, clearly done with the conversation. "I have things to do," she said. "We'll talk later when you've cooled down." But there was nothing left to cool down. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my hands, staring at the contact list. My manager's name sat there, waiting. I hesitated. Then I called. I explained as calmly as I could. I didn't blame my mom. I didn't dramatize it. I just said the truth, that my transportation situation had changed suddenly and I wouldn't make it in on time. There was a pause on the other end. "Emma," my manager said carefully, "this can't keep happening." "I know," I said. "I'm trying to fix it." "I'm sorry," he replied, "but we need reliability." The call ended politely. It didn't end kindly. I sat there long after, phone still in my hand, listening to the house wake up around me, my brother laughing in the kitchen, my mom making coffee like it was any other day. My life had just been derailed. And to them, it was manageable. That was the moment I stopped arguing. Because you don't debate with people who've already decided you'll absorb the damage. I tried to fix it. That's the part people assume you skip, that you just give up and blame everyone else. But I didn't. I spent the next 2 days doing everything I could think of to make the situation workable. I borrowed rides where I could. I paid for ride shares I couldn't afford. I left the house hours earlier than usual just to make sure I wouldn't be late again. Every trip felt like walking on a tightrope, knowing one delay, one cancellation, one missed connection could cost me everything. And it did. On the third day, my ride fell through at the last minute. The friend who'd promised to take me got called into work unexpectedly. I scrambled, refreshing rideshare apps, watching prices surge while the clock kept moving forward. By the time I got there, I was already late. Not drastically, not in a way most people would think mattered, but late enough. My manager called me into the office before my shift even properly started. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Emma," he said, closing the door behind us. "We've talked about this." "I know," I said quickly. "I'm doing everything I can. My transportation situation changed suddenly." He nodded. "I understand things happen, but reliability is part of the job." I wanted to scream that my car had been sold without my consent, that my mother had taken away the one thing keeping me dependable, that none of this had anything to do with my work ethic. I didn't say any of that, because none of it would have changed the outcome. "We need someone who can be here consistently," he continued. "And right now, that's not you." The words were calm, final, delivered the way decisions are when they've already been made. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I just nodded, feeling oddly detached, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. They let me finish the shift. That part felt almost cruel in its politeness. I worked on autopilot, going through motions I'd repeated hundreds of times before, knowing each one might be the last. When I clocked out, I handed over my badge and walked out into the parking lot. Again. This time, I wasn't looking for my car. I stood there for a moment, realizing how quickly everything had unraveled. One decision made without me, one asset taken, and the dominoes fell fast. I went home and told my mom. She didn't look surprised. "Well," she said, "that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate." "That job paid my bills," I said. "It was my stability." She frowned slightly. "You'll find another one." "When?" I asked. "How do I get there?" She shrugged. "You'll figure it out. You always do." The same words, over and over, like a spell she believed protected her from responsibility. My brother sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up. "I heard," he said casually. "That sucks." I looked at him. "You got cash. I lost my job." He shrugged. "I didn't ask her to sell your car. You didn't stop her either." That got his attention. He finally looked up, annoyed. "That's between you and Mom." That was when I understood something clearly. No one here was going to help me fix this. Not emotionally, not practically, not financially. I wasn't part of a family unit that rallied when one person fell. I was the person expected to absorb the fall so everyone else could keep standing. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the same way I had the night before. But something had changed. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was done negotiating. Losing the job hurt. Losing the car hurt more. But losing the illusion that someone would step in, that was the sharpest cut of all. And once that illusion was gone, something else took its place. Clarity. I found out where the money went 2 days later, not because anyone sat me down to explain it, but because my brother mentioned it casually while making coffee, like he was talking about the weather. "Mom helped me out," he said. "I paid off part of my credit card." Finally, I stared at him. "With my car?" He didn't even flinch. "Well, yeah," he said. "She sold it, didn't she?" There was no guilt in his voice, no hesitation, just acceptance. Like this was the natural order of things. "You knew it was mine," I said. He shrugged. "I knew it was in your name, but Mom said it was fine." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Mom said it was fine. That was how decisions worked in this house. Not through conversation, not through consent. Through permission granted to some and expected compliance from others. I went to my mom then, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while she washed dishes. "You gave him the money," I said. She didn't turn around. "He needed it." "For what?" I asked. "He was behind," she said. "Cards. A few bills. You know how he is." I did know how he was. He spent first and worried later. He always had. And when things caught up to him, someone else, usually my mom, stepped in to soften the landing. "And what about me?" I asked. "I lost my job." She finally faced me, her expression annoyed. "You'll get another one." "When?" I pressed. "How am I supposed to get there?" "You can take the bus," she repeated. "Or walk if you have to." "Walk." The word landed heavy. "It takes over an hour," I said. "One way." She waved that off. "People do harder things." I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity finally broke through whatever restraint I'd been holding on to. "You sold my car," I said slowly. "The thing that allowed me to work. And you used the money to fix his mess." "He's family," she replied sharply. "So am I." She hesitated, then said the quiet part out loud. "You don't need as much help." That was it. The sentence that explained everything without trying to soften it. My brother needed help because he couldn't manage. I didn't need help because I always managed. So my stability was treated as excess. Something that could be converted into cash when someone else was struggling. I looked at my brother again, sitting comfortably, phone in hand, debt lighter because of me. "Are you going to pay me back?" I asked. He scoffed. "I didn't borrow from you, but you benefited from it." "That's between you and Mom," he said, already done with the conversation. I walked away then. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I finally understood the rules. In this family, accountability flowed upward only when it was convenient. Responsibility flowed downward to whoever could handle it. And that had always been me. Later that night, I checked my bank account again. Still empty. No reimbursement, no apology, no plan to make it right. Just silence. I sat on my bed and thought about all the times I'd been told I was lucky. Lucky to be capable. Lucky to be strong. Lucky to be adaptable. What no one ever said was that luck, in this family, meant being the one everyone leaned on until you cracked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done pretending this was a misunderstanding. This wasn't about a car. It wasn't even about money. It was about how easily my life had been rearranged to make someone else more comfortable. And once I saw that clearly, there was no going back. Saying no didn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happened quietly. The next time my mom asked me for help like nothing had changed. She knocked on my door that morning with her phone in hand, already talking before I'd even fully sat up. "I need you to send me some money," she said. Just enough to cover a few things until the end of the month. I looked at her, still processing the words. I don't have a job, I said. She waved that away. You'll find something? This is just temporary. That familiar tightening started in my chest, the reflex to scramble, to fix, to make it work somehow. The version of me that had always figured it out stirred automatically. Then I remembered the empty driveway, the manager's tired face, my brother's credit card balance dropping because my car was gone. No, I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. Solid. Heavy. She blinked. What? I said no, I repeated. I don't have money to give you. Her face hardened almost instantly. Are you serious right now? Yes. She laughed sharply. After everything I've done for you? There it was. The lever she'd always pulled. I'm not doing this, I said. Not anymore. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. So now you're punishing me? I'm protecting myself, I replied. You sold my car. You cost me my job. I'm not funding anyone else's life. Her voice rose. That was for your brother. You know he was struggling. So was I said. You just decided that didn't matter. She stepped closer, anger flashing. You're being selfish. I didn't argue. I'm being done, I said. That seemed to shock her more than anything else I'd said. For years, she'd relied on my explanations, my guilt, my need to be understood. Now there was none of that. She turned away abruptly. Fine, she snapped. Don't come crying to me when you need help. The irony almost made me smile. That afternoon, my brother confronted me. What's your problem? He asked. Mom says you're refusing to help now. I can't help, I said. And even if I could, I wouldn't. He scoffed. Wow, so you're really doing this? Doing what? Acting like the victim, he replied. You lost your car. It sucks, but it helped me out. I looked at him calmly. It destroyed my stability. You'll recover, he said. You always do. The same words. Again. That's not an invitation, I said. That's a warning. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not cushioning your mistakes anymore. He laughed. You don't get to decide that. I just did. The house felt colder after that. Not hostile, just distant. Conversations stopped flowing. Doors closed more often. I became the problem that didn't cooperate. And for the first time, I let that be true. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending my decisions. When my mom complained about money, I listened politely and offered nothing. When my brother talked about stress, I nodded and stayed silent. They didn't like it. They accused me of changing, of being ungrateful, of forgetting where I came from. They were right about one thing. I had changed. I was no longer willing to be the solution that cost me everything. The guilt still showed up sometimes, late at night, when things were quiet. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight, but every time it crept in, I reminded myself of one simple fact. Saying no hadn't ruined their lives. It had only forced them to deal with their own choices. And that was never supposed to be my job. Life didn't magically improve once I said no. That's the part people rarely talk about. Things didn't get easier right away. They got quieter and heavier in a different way. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. And for the first time, I didn't have a family pretending they were on my side while quietly undermining me. I started walking. At first, it was just to clear my head. Around the block. To the store. Then farther. I memorized bus schedules that didn't line up with anything I actually needed. Standing at stops before sunrise, clutching my phone and hoping interviews wouldn't run late. I applied everywhere. Jobs I was overqualified for. Jobs that barely paid enough to justify the commute. Jobs I never would have considered before. When I still believed stability was something you earned by being patient and understanding. Some places never called back. Others did. and then changed their minds when I mentioned transportation. I learned not to explain too much. People don't want context. They want reliability. Eventually, one place took a chance on me. It wasn't ideal. The hours were odd. The pay was lower than before, but it was reachable by bus. And it was mine. I took it. I didn't tell my mom right away. When she found out, her reaction wasn't relief. It was irritation. "You could have waited for something better," she said. "Why rush into something like that?" I almost laughed, because waiting had always meant sacrificing for someone else. "I needed income," I replied. "Not permission." She didn't like that answer. Neither did my brother, who started avoiding me once it became clear I wasn't going to bail him out anymore. He complained more, about stress, about bills, about how unfair things were. I listened without responding. That boundary, silence instead of solutions, changed everything. They didn't apologize. They didn't offer to repay me. The car money was never mentioned again, as if ignoring it could erase what it had cost me. But something else happened. They adjusted. Bills got paid without my help. Problems got solved without my input. Life went on, less comfortably, maybe, but intact. That realization hurt more than anything else. It meant the sacrifices I'd made weren't essential. They were just convenient. Months passed. I saved again. Slower this time, more carefully. Every dollar went into an account only I could access. When I finally bought another car, older than the last one, louder, less reliable, I cried in the parking lot, keys shaking in my hand. Not because it was nice, because it was mine. No one could sell it. No one could justify taking it. No one could decide I'd manage without it. I drove away feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Ownership, not just of a car, but of my life. My relationship with my mom never returned to what it was. It became smaller, polite, controlled. We talked about surface things, weather, work, nothing that required trust. She still believed she'd done what was necessary. I no longer needed her to admit otherwise. My brother eventually asked for help again. Not money, just advice. I told him I hoped things worked out and left it at that. He didn't ask twice. Looking back, losing my car felt like the worst thing that could have happened. But it wasn't. The worst thing had been believing my needs would ever come first if I stayed quiet and accommodating long enough. Walking, literally and figuratively, forced me to build a life that didn't depend on anyone else deciding I was expendable. My mom once said buses exist. She was right. So do boundaries. So does walking away. So does choosing yourself. Even when the people closest to you never do. I lost a car. I lost a job. But I stopped losing myself.